Why was she always the one they looked past? Lieutenant Sarah Chung kept her head down at the armory bench, rag in one hand, M24 rifle in the other. The scent of gun oil hung thick in the air, sharp and metallic, mixing with the low murmur of soldiers. Trading stories behind her, it was the same scene every week. Rodriguez holding court, a circle of fresh recruits hanging on his every word. He was the battalion's golden marksman, a man whose reputation walked into a room before he did. 47 confirmed kills, 3 deployments. Legendary in every way the Army loved to put on posters. She'd outshot him in every training session for the last 8 months. The first time, he'd laughed it off. Beginner's luck, he'd said, with that easy grin. The second time, he blamed. His rifle. The third, he stopped talking to her altogether. By then, the whispers had started. She's good on the range. She'd overheard Corporal Martinez telling a new batch of recruits. But the range doesn't shoot back combats. Different. Women freeze up when the pressure's real. Sarah didn't look up from her rifle, but the words slid under her skin like a blade. Not because she believed them, but because she knew others did. 8 months of perfect scores meant nothing. Her name was still absent from every deployment roster that mattered. The skill was there. The record was there, but opportunity? That belonged to others. The breaking point came during a live-fire urban combat simulation. Targets spread from 600 to 1,200 yards. Smoke and debris drifting in the wind. She'd been issued a battered M24 with a scope so clouded she could almost see fingerprints on the glass. Rodriguez, on the other hand, cradled his personal rifle, a precision-tuned instrument that gleamed like it belonged in a museum. When her turn came, Sarah felt that familiar stillness wash over her. Her breathing slowed, her pulse softened, and the world narrowed to math. Wind speed, humidity, the rhythm of a target's sway. Her first shot at 600 yards. Dead center, 900 yards. The same at 1,200 yards. The bullet split the X-ring like it had been pulled there by a string. She didn't need to look to know the crowd had gathered. She could feel the shift, the quiet when people start paying attention. Rodriguez's frustration showed in the tension of his shoulders when he missed a 1,000-yard shot moments later. The muttered curse that followed was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Lucky shots don't count when ISIS is shooting back, sweetheart," he said without looking at her. "You think this is some kind of game?" Her hands stilled on the rifle. Luck doesn't account for 8 months of consistent performance, Sergeant, and neither does gender. His laugh was bitter. "You want to talk about performance? I've had enemy snipers trying to put bullets in my head while I was lining up mine. You've been playing soldier in North Carolina. This isn't war. This is summer camp." Captain Morrison stepped in before it could get uglier. "That's enough." Chun's scores speak for themselves. His words said one thing, but his eyes? They carried the same doubt Sarah had seen before. Later that night, she sat on her bunk, orders in hand, communications detail. Not Overwatch, not sniper team. Radios and relay stations while others carried the rifles into Syria. She thought of her father in the Montana wilderness, his voice low as they waited for elk to break the tree line. It's not about strength or size, Sarah. It's patience, precision, and the ability to make the impossible shot when everything's on the line. The memory settled in her chest like a quiet vow. Somewhere, someday, that moment would come. And when it did, she would be ready, whether they believed in her or not. 3 months later, Alpha Company's routine operations in the Syrian desert felt anything but idle-laced roads, sniper fire like clockwork in certain villages. And for Sarah, the daily ache of sitting in the forward operating base bunker, headset on, logging Rodriguez's kills from miles away. Tango down, 800 yards. His voice would crackle in her ear. She'd note the time, the grid, the outcome, over and over. Her only real reprieve was the makeshift range behind the motor pool. Steel plates at long distance. the desert wind as her sparring partner. She never missed, but still wasn't flesh and blood. Then came the Tuesday that started like any other. Orders: reconnaissance patrol, village of Wadi Alif, 15 miles northeast. Rodriguez on overwatch. 4 Humvees rolling out in the heat shimmer. Low risk, they said. Establish contact with village elders, routine, by 8:47. Sarah knew it wasn't. Rodriguez's voice tore through the static, sharper than she'd ever heard it. Contact, movement on the ridgeline. 2 miles northeast. Single shooter, elevated position. She plotted the coordinates. 1 sniper wasn't unusual. Harassment fire was common. But the shot Corporal Williams described next made her stomach tighten. That had to be 1.5 miles. Rodriguez confirmed it. This guy's way. Out there, and he's good. Real good. He took the first shot, missed seconds later. The enemy's reply shattered the radio antenna on a Humvee. A warning as deliberate as it was precise. Over the next 20 minutes, the canyon became a cage. Every attempt to move was met with a bullet snapping past helmets, punching into the dirt inches from boots. Not to kill, to hurt. The perfect trap. And when the ground assault came from the south, it was already too late. Gunfire, shouts, the sound of men and women pinned and dying. Rodriguez was hit. His voice tight with pain. Without him, the enemy sniper was unchecked, free to dismantle Alpha Company 1 soldier at a time. Morrison's voice on the net was raw. Any station. We need immediate sniper support. That shooter's got us dead to rights. Sarah's gaze fell to the rifle case beside her, her M24. The same one she'd carried out, too. The motor pool range 100 times. She knew the math. The wind, the drop. She knew what this would take. 3 miles. Her hand closed on the case. She stood. She didn't even feel her own heartbeat. What was she doing? The thought flickered and died before it could grow. Her hands already knew the drill. They were pulling the M24 from its case, snapping the bolt in place, checking the chamber with the same muscle memory that had been her. Quiet rebellion for months. She grabbed the range cards. Wind meter, spotting scope. The floor of the communications bunker was already behind her. Metal stairs rattled under her boots as she climbed the observation tower. Below, the desert stretched in layers of gold and rust. Far to the northeast, the canyon was a faint scar on the horizon. Somewhere in that cut of earth, 23. People were running out of time. Rodriguez's voice cracked through her earpiece. Tight and pained. He's got us zeroed. Every time someone moves, he drops around right where they're headed. This guy's not human. From the tower's top platform, she found the canyon through her spotting scope, saw the flickers of muzzle flash and shadow, the faint shapes of Humvees pinned in the open. But the enemy's position? Invisible until Jackson's voice broke in. Muzzle flash. 2 o'clock from the village. Way out on the ridge. 3 miles. Maybe more. Sarah swung the scope toward the coordinates. At first, it was nothing but heat shimmer and jagged rock. Then, a glint metal, tucked behind a boulder like a serpent in shade. Her breath stilled. That was him. She dropped behind the rifle, adjusting the bipod, letting her cheek settle into the worn pad of the stock. Chun, what the hell are you doing up there? Morrison's voice cut across the net. Someone must have spotted her climb. Sir, I'm the best shot we have available. Rodriguez is down. That sniper will kill everyone if we don't take him out. Negative. Your communication's not. A sniper. Get back to your post. She ignored it. The math in her head had already begun. Drop at 28 miles. About 47 feet. Wind from the southwest. Gusting between 8 and 12 miles an hour. Flight time. Almost 4 seconds. Even the Earth's rotation had to be accounted for. She could hear the firefight intensifying. Williams shouting for a medic. Someone yelling. They were nearly out of ammo. The enemy sniper's rhythm was relentless, one precise, almost casual shot after another. Chun, abort. That's an order. If she missed, he'd know exactly where she was. He could turn his rifle on the base itself, but if she didn't try, Alpha Company would be gone. Her father's voice came back unbidden, the Montana wind in her ears. The shots made long before you pulled the trigger. She locked her breathing, felt the wind on her cheek, waited for the gust to fall into a pattern. Through the scope, the enemy shifted, settling in for his next kill. She had seconds. This is it, she whispered. To herself, to the canyon, to the ghost of every moment she'd been told she wasn't ready. Her finger found the trigger. Pressure. Slow, steady, the rifle bucked. The round began its 4-second journey. Sarah kept her eye on the scope. The landscape blurred and shimmered with heat. The ridge a speck in the distance. 1 second, 2, 3. The 4th second stretched into forever, and then a small puff of dust, a shape crumpling behind the rock. Jackson's voice hit the radio like a crack of lightning. The sniper's down. I can see him. He's not moving. For a heartbeat, the desert went still. No more rounds snapping through the air. No more hurting fire. Just the strange, hollow quiet that follows something impossible. Her knees nearly buckled. Rodriguez came over the net, voice rough, but different now. Chun. Hell of a shot. I couldn't have made that on my best day. The words didn't feel like praise. They felt like a door finally opening. How fast could a battlefield change? The answer was right there in the glass of her scope. Seconds ago, Alpha Company had been pinned, trapped under a sniper's invisible hand. Now, the canyon looked different. The fight had shifted. Morrison's voice broke through the net, urgent but steadier. Outstanding work, Chun, but we're not done. Ground assault's still active. Can you provide overwatch while we extract? She was already scanning, copy, through the magnification. She caught movement, fighters scrambling from cover, their heads whipping toward the observation tower as if the air itself had turned hostile. Without their long-range guardian, they were exposed in terrain that no longer belonged to them. The first shot was simple to 1,100 yards. Wind quartering right. The second, harder to 1,700, moving target. She adjusted, led the shot, fired. Another insurgent dropped. Her breathing was calm, measured. Her voice on the radio was almost detached. 2 down. Watch the north ridge. They're falling back through the rocks. On the ground, Alpha Company began to push. Morrison called out bearings. Williams relayed positions. Sarah worked between them like a silent metronome, each shot marking the beat of the fight's reversal at 2,300 yards. She clipped a fighter's rifle clean out of his hands. Not a kill, just a message. The man froze, then bolted into open desert. Fear was faster than any bullet. She heard it in the scattered shouts that carried faintly across the distance. Warnings in another language about the ghost sniper. The enemy's fire grew sloppy. Their retreat, desperate. Minutes blurred into an hour. She barely moved except to cycle the bolt, track, and fire. Her shoulders ached. Her eyes burned from staring into the mirage-hazed glass. But the calm inside her never cracked. When the Apaches arrived, their rotors thundered across the sky, scattering what remained of the ambush. By the time dust from their strafing run settled, Alpha Company was moving. 3 wounded, no fatalities. A miracle. The radio chatter softened to logistics. Medevac. Coordinates, ammo counts, casualty reports. Sarah's world widened again. The tower under her boots. The dry taste in her mouth. The desert heat pressing against her neck. Only then did she let herself lean back from the scope. Her rifle lay across her lap, the barrel warm against her leg. She'd done it. Not just the 28-mile shot. Not just the Overwatch. She'd stepped into the role they'd spent months denying her, and no one could take that away now. But the relief wasn't joy. It was quieter, heavier, because she knew the truth behind the miracle. The line between life and Loss out here was thinner than a trigger pull. Why was the base so quiet? It wasn't silence. Not really. Generators hummed. Somewhere, a wrench clinked on concrete. Farther off, a radio operator read out coordinates in a bored monotone. But compared to the hours before, the air felt hollow. Emptied of urgency. The kind of quiet that comes after something too big to be talked about just yet. Sarah kept walking. Her rifle case was slung over one shoulder. Heavier than it should have been, the metal stares down from the observation. Tower had left a faint burn in her thighs. Her mouth was dry, not from thirst, but from the aftertaste of adrenaline finally burning off. It had been maybe 40 minutes since Alpha Company's convoy rolled back through the gates. She'd watched them from the tower, the battered Humvees, dust-caked and scarred with fresh bullet pocks, and Tenny Bentor gone entirely. She'd counted the number of soldiers stepping off each one, matching them against what she'd heard in her headset. 3 wounded, all moving under their own power. Not in body bags. That alone was a miracle. As she crossed the motor pool, a few soldiers glanced her way. It wasn't the usual dismissive flicker she'd grown used to. These looks lingered, curious, measuring. A couple nodded. One gave a small, crooked grin that didn't need translation. We heard. She didn't stop. The armory door creaked as she pushed it open. The smell of solvent hit her immediately. Comfort and a habit all in one. She set the M24 on the bench, unclipped the bipod, popped the bolt. The ritual steadied her hands, even if they weren't shaking. That's when she heard the footsteps. Rodriguez filled the doorway. His left arm was in a sling. The uniform sleeve darkened where blood had soaked through earlier. His face was pale, but his eyes, they were clear in a way she hadn't seen before. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. He finally broke it. "I owe you an apology." Sarah looked up from the rifle. "How?" he continued, stepping inside. "I owe you more than that. I owe you my life and the lives of 22 other soldiers." He reached into his pocket with his good hand and pulled out something. Small, matte black, and instantly recognizable. His custom scope. The one she'd seen him clean like a relic. The one she'd watched him adjust with the care of a surgeon. It had been with him through 3 deployments. This belongs to someone who can actually use it properly. Her chest tightened. "Rodriguez, I can't take that. You earned it," he said, cutting her off. His voice had no edge, no defensiveness. That wasn't luck today. That was skill I've never seen before. Wind drift, bullet drop, hell, probably Coriolis effect. You calculated it all while people were dying. That's not something you teach. That's something you're born with. She accepted it slowly, the weight of the metal warm from his hand. She didn't just see a piece of gear. She saw everything it meant. Acknowledgement, respect, and the unspoken truth that whatever line there'd been between them was gone. The armory door opened again. Captain Morrison stepped in. The look on his face was strange. Relief overlaid with something almost like embarrassment. "Chun," he began, "I need to apologize. I should have listened to you months ago. I let assumptions get in the way of making the right call." She met his gaze evenly. "You made the best decision you could with the information you had." "Sir," his jaw tightened. "No, I made the easy decision, the one that didn't challenge anyone's expectations. That almost cost us everything today. That ends now." He pulled a folded form from his pocket, set it on the bench beside her rifle. "I'm recommending you for immediate transfer to sniper school, and I'm putting in for a Bronze Star." The words didn't land all at once. She just stared at the paper. The bureaucratic formality of it, so at odds with the heat and dust of the last few hours. Her throat felt tight. "Understood, sir." Morrison gave a small nod. "Get some rest, Sergeant." And just like that, he was gone. The story of the 28 Mile. Shots spread faster than she thought possible. By evening, she could hear it bouncing off the walls of the DFAC. Half true in the way all battlefield stories are. Some had her making the kill in a sandstorm. Others swore it was 4 miles, not under 3. She ignored it all. She found her quiet in the range behind the motor pool, under the dim work lights. She lined up steel silhouettes at various distances and worked through her shots with the same focus as always. Breathe, break the shot, cycle, repeat. She wasn't chasing anything now, just keeping the edge sharp. That's where Rodriguez found her again 2 days later. He didn't say much, just dropped a box of match-grade ammo on the bench and sat nearby, watching without comment. The third day, it wasn't him who came. A young private, barely 18, maybe 19, boots still too clean, uniform still stiff. "Ma'am," she started nervously, "I was wondering, do you think you could teach me to shoot like that?" Sarah paused, lowering the rifle. "What's your name?" "Martinez, motor pool maintenance." The words came out fast, like she was afraid they'd sound smaller if she rushed them. No, I'm not combat arms or anything, but I've always been good with rifles, expert marksman and basic. I don't want to spend my whole career turning wrenches." Sarah studied her for a moment. She remembered that feeling, being capable, but boxed in by the role someone else thought you deserved. She held the rifle out, stock first. "Show me what you can do at 300 yards. And don't call me ma'am. Call me Sergeant Chun." Martinez took the rifle carefully, her hands finding a natural grip without hesitation. She dropped into prone, sighted in, and waited for the wind to steady before taking the shot. The clang of steel came a second later. Sarah smiled. "We'll work on it by the end of the week." The whispers about her weren't doubts anymore. They were something else. Curiosity, maybe even pride. She didn't seek the attention, didn't lean into it, but she didn't shrink from it either. Some nights, she sat outside her quarters, listening to the desert wind and thinking about that 4-second stretch between trigger break and impact. How the shot had been the culmination of everything. Montana hunts with her father, years on the range, months of being sidelined, and how none of it guaranteed she'd make it. It could have gone the other way. Easily, that truth kept her grounded, because it wasn't about the legend already forming around her name. It was about the quiet fact that when the moment came, she'd acted in, and sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. What did you do when the moment that defined you refused to let go? Sarah learned the answer the day she stepped off the C-17 and into the biting cold of Fort Benning's sniper school grounds. The Georgia air in winter was sharper than she remembered. Each breath cutting into her lungs. Her orders had been rushed through. Morrison's recommendation stamped with the kind of urgency that comes from a commander who nearly lost an entire company. The 28-mile shot had followed her like a shadow. Across every form, every handshake, every passing glance on the tarmac, she hated it already. Not the shot. That moment had been hers, pure and unbroken. But the legend that had grown around it felt like a weight she hadn't agreed to carry by the time she reached the main building. She'd already heard her name twice in murmured conversations from soldiers she didn't know. Sniper school wasn't designed for comfort. The instructors were deliberate in stripping away ego as quickly as they stripped away illusions about skill. The first morning began with a windswept range and a dozen shooters lying prone on damp ground. Rifles lined up like patient predators. Sarah could feel the eyes on her before anyone said a word. The senior instructor, Master Sergeant Keating, walked the line, boots crunching on gravel. He stopped behind her without looking down. "Sergeant Chun," he said, voice neutral. "Word is you made a shot in Syria that'd give God himself a headache." A ripple of low laughter moved through the other students. Sarah kept her cheek welded to the stock. "Sir, the word is exaggerated." Keating didn't react. "Good. We'll see if you can hit paper at 800 before we talk about miles." The first week was fundamentals, the kind she'd drilled into her bones long before she wore a uniform. Breath control, trigger discipline, spotting, wind reading. The difference here was that every mistake was magnified. Every variable introduced on purpose to break you down. One day, they fired in freezing rain. The next, under a sweltering sun, targets shifted from still to moving to disappearing entirely. Behind smoke, Sarah didn't falter, but she didn't dominate either. And that, she realized, was good. She wanted to earn her place here in the mud and the grind, not on the back of a story. Still, the story crept in. On the third week, a student named Anders, lean, tall, with the easy arrogance of someone used to winning, settled next to her on the line. "You know," he said, loading a magazine, "my uncle doesn't believe your shot happened. Says it's impossible. Ballistics don't line up." Sarah chambered around without looking at him. "Tell your uncle I agree. It shouldn't have been possible." He grinned, as if she'd confirmed his points. "So, luck?" She took her shot. The round struck steel at 900 yards with a clean, ringing note. No, it was math, training, and 4 seconds of not screwing up. The kind of thing you prepare your whole life for without knowing it. Anders didn't have a reply. It was during a night shoot in week 5 that Sarah felt something shift. They were set up on a ridge overlooking a low valley. Targets glowed faintly under IR strobes, visible only through night optics. The wind was fickle, light at their backs, heavier across the valley floor. Keating called out, 5 targets, varying distances. "You have 2 minutes, Sarah settled. In, the darkness made the world smaller. Her vision reduced to the green wash of the scope. Her breathing slowed. She hit the first plate at 700 yards, shifted. The second, 850. The third, moving, barely visible, took longer. She let it, squeezed, heard the faint clang, 4th, 5th, every one down. When she rolled onto her side, Keating was watching. Her, no smile, but a small nod. In this place, it was worth more than applause. She still thought about Syria, about the heat mirage on the ridge, the enemy's tiny silhouette. She thought about how easily the wind could have betrayed her, and she thought about Rodriguez, about his scope now sitting wrapped in cloth in her quarters. A reminder of both what she'd done and what it had cost. One evening, after the day's training, she sat on the range bench cleaning her rifle when a shadow fell across her work. Anders. He handed her a small spiral notebook. "Wind formulas," he said simply, "the way I calculate for gusts. Thought you might like a look." She flipped through. His math was sharp, his notes meticulous. She looked up at him. "Why?" "You're the best shooter here," he said, "and I want to beat you at your best." For the first time since arriving, she felt the corner of her mouth lift. "Then keep working." Graduation day came in a cold wind. Keating read off names, each one stepping forward to receive the patch. When he called hers, there was no speech, no reference to Syria, just the weight of the patch in her palm and the quiet knowledge that she'd earned it here, shot by shot afterward. As the new graduate stood in a loose circle, Anders raised a hand in mock salute. "So what now, Chun? Back to the desert?" "Wherever they send me," she said. She didn't say what she was thinking, that the desert was in her now, the echo of a ridge 3 miles away and the puff of dust that had changed everything. What did it mean to be ready? The question pressed against Sarah's ribs as the C-130 banked low over the darkened desert. Inside the fuselage, the air smelled faintly of oil and dust, the deep vibration of the engine steady beneath the harness. Straps across her chest. This wasn't training anymore. This was a mission brief that ended with, "You'll have the glass. Make it count." She was here as the sniper. No communications detail tagged to her orders. No borrowed slot. Her name had been penciled in before anyone else's. The team was small, 6 operators from her new unit, call sign Hound 2, tasked with a high-value capture outside an insurgent-held village. Intel said the target was moving at night, with only a few escorts staying off main roads. The kind of job where Overwatch could make or break the mission. On the flight in, She reviewed the terrain photos. A thin crescent of clay rooftops along a dried wadi. Sharp ridges climbing on either side. A shooter's dream for concealment. But also perfect for anyone watching them. The bird dropped altitude. Engines throttling back. The loadmaster's hand signal came. The ramp yawned open to the night. She breathed in air cold enough to cut her throat. Minutes later, boots hit sand. The approach was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like your own breath is too loud. Sarah moved with her spotter, Corporal Vale, a wiry Texan with a drawl that never seemed to disappear, even under NVGs. He didn't talk much out here, and she appreciated that. They climbed the ridge on the south side of the village, the rock. Giving just enough cover to keep their silhouettes broken, she sat up prone, the rifle steady on her pack. Vale ranged the street below, 200 meters to the well. 320 to the east end, he murmured. Target'll come from that track. Sarah scanned through the scope, no movement yet. Just the faint outlines of structures under starlight. The occasional flicker of light from inside. She dialed. Her parallax adjusted for the wind whispering across the ridge. It was a clean lane, no brush, no wires. They waited. The call came low over comms. Hound 2, eyes open, package moving. Shapes emerged from the dark. 4 figures, one in the middle, shorter, broader, wrapped in a keffiyeh. The target. They kept close to the shadowed side of the street, steps quick but not rushed. Sarah tracked them. Heart rate a steady metronome. The extraction team was a block away, closing from the opposite end. It would work, unless something else was waiting. That's when she saw it. A flicker on the rooftop opposite their path. Barely more than a shadow shift, but wrong in its rhythm. Too still for a villager. Too patient for anyone just moving. Across the roof, her crosshairs slid there. A man lay prone. The outline of a rifle glinting faintly in the starlight. His muzzle was trained not on the target, but down the street, right where Hound 2's operators would appear. She whispered, "Shooter, rooftop, 30 meters west of the well." Vale's reply was low. "Take it." Her breath slowed. The wind kissed her cheek from the right. Light but steady, she adjusted a half mil left, settled. The squeeze was smooth, steady. The round punched the night open. The figure on the roof jerked once, then rolled. Out of sight, she was already back on the street. Scanning for the escort's reaction, one flinched toward the roof. The others froze just long enough for the extraction team to close in. Radio chatter snapped into focus. Target secure, moving to exfil. They held overwatch until the last shadow slipped from the village into the desert. Only then did they break down their position, moving fast and low across the ridge. Back at the FOB, the debrief was clinical. Threat identified, neutralized, extraction successful. The commander gave a short nod, the kind reserved for jobs done exactly as expected. It was Vale who broke the formality when they stepped outside into the chill air. He gave her a sidelong look, half smirk tugging his mouth. "You see that guy, before I called him?" Sarah shrugged. "He moved wrong." Vale shook his head. "Nah, you don't just see that. You feel it. Not many do." The words landed heavier than praise. That night, lying in her cot, Sarah stared at the canvas overhead and thought about readiness. Not the kind in checklists or training schedules. The kind that comes from carrying the weight of every shot you've taken. And the ones you haven't. She wasn't chasing the next miracle now. She was preparing for the moments no one else saw coming. What if the perfect shot wasn't the right one? The thought came uninvited, gnawing at the back of Sarah's mind as she lay prone on a rocky slope in the dead of night. Her rifle angled toward the glow of a valley below. The moon was barely a sliver. The world through her scope was green shadows and shifting silhouettes. This was supposed to be clean. A hit on a logistics convoy supplying an insurgent cell that had been harassing Allied patrols for weeks. The route was predictable. The target profile confirmed. 3 trucks, minimal escort, hit them before they reached the cache site. She had the high ground, a clear lane, every variable dialed in. And then the complication walked into her sight picture. A child, small frame, maybe 10 years old, clinging to the back of the lead truck's cab, arms wrapped around a crate lashed to the roof. No helmet, no flak vest, just bare limbs in the cold night air. Sarah blinked hard, adjusted the focus. The convoy rolled on, oblivious to the scope. Trained on them. Chun. Confirmed sight picture. Vale's voice came low in her ear from where he was glossing the valley beside her. She hesitated a fraction too long. I've got a non-combatant on the lead vehicle. Static filled the next second before command came back on. Hound 2 mission remains. That convoy reaches the cache. We'll lose more than 1 life. The wind was light, almost gentle. Her dope card said the shot was a certainty. But her gut said certainty didn't mean right. Through the green wash, she could see the boy's face turn toward the hills. Not toward her, but toward something unseen. The way kids sometimes sense things without knowing why. Chun. Vale murmured, "You got maybe 30 seconds before they're under the ridge shadow." Her mind split into 2 tracks. One counted meters per second, bullet drop, lead time. The other weighed what it would mean to take the shot. The child's. Weighed in the balance against whoever might die if she didn't. Her father's voice came back from Montana. Sometimes, not pulling the trigger is harder than pulling it. "Stand by," she whispered. Her crosshair shifted, past the cab, past the boy, to the rear truck's engine block. It was a smaller target. Harder angle. At this range, she had 1 clean shot before the convoy scattered. She breathed out, squeezed. The round slammed into steel. The rear truck jolted, wheels locking. Sparks lit the dark as it fishtailed and rolled sideways, blocking the narrow road. Engines roared. Shouts erupted over the comnet. The other 2 trucks braked hard, momentum and panic tangling them into a mess of stalled vehicles. Vale's voice was calm, but she heard the approval under it. "Nice roadblock." The assault team moved in fast from the eastern draw, cutting down the few armed escorts before they could regroup. The boy was pulled off the lead cab by a young corporal, wrapped in a blanket, and hustled out of the kill zone. It wasn't textbook. It wasn't clean, but it was right. Back at base. The after-action review was all numbers and outcomes. 3 vehicles destroyed. No friendly casualties. Supplies seized. 1 rescued civilian miner. No one asked why the lead vehicle's driver was still alive. No one mentioned the deviation from the original order. Vale did. Later, when they were packing gear in the armory. "You had the kill shot," he said without looking up. "Why'd you go for the engine?" Sarah wiped down the M24, the scope cool under her fingers. "Because there are some things you can't take back, and some you don't want to." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." That night, lying awake, Sarah thought about how the line between precision and mercy was as thin as the crosshair she looked through. The Army trained you to make the perfect shot. They didn't always train you to live with it afterward. And sometimes, the perfect shot wasn't the one you took. What happened when the fight was over? But the story refused to end. Sarah thought about that often on the flight back to the States. The hum of the C-17 pressing against her ears, like a constant reminder that she wasn't in the desert anymore. She should have felt relief, closure. Instead, there was only that strange, open space you get when a mission ends, but the momentum inside you hasn't. Her gear bag sat wedged between her boots. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was Rodriguez's scope. She'd carried it across continents, across rooftops and ridgelines, never letting it out of reach. It wasn't superstition. It was a reminder of where she'd been, of what it had taken to be seen when the plane touched down. She was met with things she didn't expect. Handshakes from officers she didn't know. A small cluster of reporters shouting questions about the impossible shot. And a handful of soldiers she'd never worked with stopping her in the hangar to say welcome home. somewhere along the way, her name had turned into something people repeated like a benchmark. Not Sarah Chun, soldier. Not even Sergeant Chun, sniper. She'd become the one who made that shot. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. Weeks later, she stood at a podium in a base theater, the bronze star pinned to her uniform. The room smelled faintly of dust and coffee. Morrison was in the front row. Rodriguez 2 seats over with his arm still in a sling from a follow-up surgery. They read the citation. Her eyes drifted over the crowd, some polite interest, some genuine pride, some that unreadable soldier's stare that meant I'm reserving judgment. When it was her turn to speak, she kept it short. That day wasn't about a miracle. It was about preparation meeting a moment I couldn't see coming. Every one of you will have your moment. You won't get to pick when, but you will get to pick who you are when it comes. She stepped down to polite applause, feeling more drained than she expected. The invitations kept coming, interview requests, conference panels, even a documentary producer wanting to fly her back to Syria for recreation shots. She turned down most of it. The few she accepted, she kept the same tone. Technical, respectful, no theatrics. She knew the truth didn't need dressing up. The 28-mile shot had become a story people told because it made them feel something, awe, maybe, or hope. But for her, it was still 4 seconds of wind math and steadiness bought with years of being underestimated. One cold morning, months later, she was back on the range. Not the desert range behind the motor pool, but a wooded stretch of steel plates in Montana. She was on leave, staying at her father's cabin. The air smelled like pine sap and frost. She heard the crunch of boots behind her before she heard the voice. Sergeant Chun? A young woman stood there, maybe 19, wearing civilian layers under a surplus field jacket. She had a bolt-action rifle slung across her back and the same nervous determination Sarah had seen in Martinez. In herself years ago, I read about. What you did, the girl said. I've been shooting since I was little. My dad says I'm good, but I want to be that good. Sarah studied her a moment. Show me. The girl unslung the rifle, settled into prone, and sent a round into a steel plate at 400 yards with a clean, sharp ring. Her form was raw, but balanced. Sarah nodded once. We can work with that. They spent the next hours trading the rifle back and forth. The snow melting under their elbows, Sarah showed her how to read mirage off the snow line, how to watch wind in the tops of distant trees, how to breathe in a way that kept the reticle still even when your heart was pounding. When they finally packed up, the girl's cheeks were red from cold, her grin wide. Thank you, she said. Sarah just smiled. Pass it on when it's your turn. That night, she sat on the cabin porch with a mug of coffee, watching the dark settle over the mountains. Somewhere out there, another ridge waited, another unseen target, another 4-second stretch that would test someone else. She thought of Rodriguez, of Morrison, of Vale, of Martinez and Anders and the unnamed boy on the convoy truck. Every one of them had taught her something about skill, about judgment, about the weight of pulling a trigger and the heavier weight of not. The world would remember her for one shot. She'd remember herself for all the choices around it, because sometimes the moment that defines you isn't the one people tell stories about. It's the quiet decision, the unglamorous work, the way you steady your hands when no one is watching. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.